What is up, everybody? It is Alex from Heavy New York calling from the altar again, and this time we got Nicole from Kallias. It is so great to be able to talk to you. Thanks for coming on the show today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me back. It's been a few years.
I know it's been such a long time. Like I can't even remember when was the last time we spoke. Like time is so.
So I looked it up and it was 2020 because when I saw the notification, I'm like, yeah, this is awesome because it's been 3 years and so much has happened since then.
I know.
So
In 2020,
looking
I didn't even have a computer that took Zoom. So like all my interviews were
Oh my
like
god.
recorded on speakerphone with a camcorder pointing at it.
Oh my god.
Yeah, in case anybody was wondering why the audio sounded bad on all those interviews, that's why. But yeah, great to catch up with you again. But it's so awesome to have you here. The First Ascent is a fantastic album, and I cannot wait for the rest of the world to hear this. This record is just truly breathtaking when you open up with the approach and you end with the first single, Everlasting, Lugna Part 2. Is that first single that you released maybe a good representation of what this whole album is going to sound like for people who haven't heard it yet?
You know, it's funny you mention that because I feel like that song in particular acts more as a departure from that album and kind of a glimpse into what the next album is going to sound like. So, seeing as it's the last track and there's like a part one and a part two, and I guess this is technically the third single that we released from this album because the last two we released Dark Machine and we released Disembodied Existence as well. So we've kind of been trickling these out, and Lungta is really the closest one to the album release date, and I feel like the most different sounding song on the whole record.
Yeah. You mentioned that it's leading into the idea for what the next album is going to be like. So are you like directing this
Yes.
album like George Lucas in a way where you kind of have like the sequel planned out as you're already working on the first one?
It is. I'd say it's probably 70% done already. So
Oh wow, that's awesome. That's awesome.
I know. Yeah. Because we finished this one last year and it took quite a long time to release it. So I'm kind of, once I finish something, it's a weird feeling as an artist, right? You finish this huge thing that took you like years to do. And then it's like, okay, I'm done with this. Now what? So the only thing I thought to do was, all right, next album, like just start, like never, I feel like you should never stop writing or, never stop being creative. So
Absolutely.
I didn't want to get too comfortable and be like, all right, I'm going to take a long break and see what happens. Cause I've done that before with writing and it's really like this muscle that you have to continually exercise, otherwise you kind of lose it, and then that's where like writer's block comes and you kind of just don't know where to start. But when you get in that really good flow state and you just keep that momentum going, I think that's one of the best feelings.
Does this at all have any relation to the EP that you released prior to this? I believe the fourth phase in a way. Is that kind of like the
Yeah.
trailer or the preview or maybe even the prequel to this concept that we're sort of getting with this, what you're working on right now?
Yes and no. I mean, we definitely changed a lot, right? With this album, like we added vocals, which was a huge thing, seeing as we started as an instrumental band, and we didn't really have plans to keep it as an instrumental band or even find a vocalist. It just kind of came naturally. So we're like, all right, I think like, some of this newer material actually calls for vocals. So then we made that decision and then decided to like do the whole thing. I mean, there's still one instrumental on the record, which is kind of our little palette cleanser. But everything else has full on has vocals everywhere.
Did you think of a
So
concept that you wanted to sort of continue on? Like, did you think of this idea before like vocals and lyrics came into place, or did this idea sort of unfold as you were writing more and more music?
it kind of unfolded as we were writing more music because we did have some things written that we didn't know if it was going to have vocals or not. And of course, like adding vocals to the mix, I kind of, I didn't have experience with that our bass player Chris did. He's a classically trained vocalist, so I think it was easier for him to just jump in and like, I'd never like written lyrics before and like having to come up with these concepts now. So I'm like, all right, well, I don't really know what to talk about here. I'm not a very like poetic person, but I do have a big love for the outdoors and climbing, and that did take a big part in the lyrical concepts for this record. Obviously, the name of the record's First Ascent. So it really is a combination of, my experiences climbing and also our love for, sci-fi topics. So, we get kind of like weird in some songs, but other ones are, just about climbing.
So you kind of just answered my next question. I was going to ask if this lyrical concept in a way is meant to be telling a story external from yourself, or is it kind of have some personal meaning with your love of the outdoors and all of that incorporated in there? I'd imagine it makes the concept both personal as well as having its own unique storyline outside of yourself, right?
Yeah, it does, and you kind of said that perfectly, better than I would.
No.
Because so it really is. Some of the lyrics can be interpreted differently, depending on the listener. But for me personally, like I talk about a lot of like inner like mental challenges when I went on a lot of these adventures, and kind of like what goes on like mentally and physically and pushing through that. So that's kind of how I was conveying it throughout the songs.
Do you feel like as you perform these songs and even as you read through the lyrics in a way, you maybe portray somebody outside of your personal self, or is it still very much who you are and you're just narrating this album?
I think it's both, because it really is who I am and, the things that I go through. But I also think that it can be very relatable to a lot of things, outside of just climbing or being in the mountains. Like we all, have our struggles when we're working on a project or just something, of significance in our lives. So, like being able to control like your mental thoughts and, take care of yourself physically while doing that, I think is important.
Did it almost feel like you sort of found coping mechanisms or found answers about yourself in a way with this album? And maybe as you embark further on this journey and further on this concept, this is kind of like a demonstration on who you particularly are through this adventure?
Yeah, writing lyrics for an album was an adventure in itself for me. So it was kind of interesting putting my thoughts and experiences like on paper or, in our digital document that we have. But it was pretty cool. Like just being able to like vocalize those experiences instead of just, telling somebody about them, but, writing it down like as a form of art. Right.
Of course. But do you feel, because especially since Kallias started off instrumentally, do you feel like you express a different side of yourself that you may have not have been able to express just on the guitar? Do you feel like maybe that this unlocked a new form of expression for you?
It totally did. And it was really difficult at first. But now I'm so glad that I did it, because it was just something new to learn and, learn about what else I'm capable of. And it's just a whole other instrument, to add to the mix, which, I feel like during and after this album, as I said, I'm like pretty far into writing the next one. And I've taken on like a lot more tasks with that. So it's like, thinking about the vocal patterns, the orchestrations, the synth design, the guitar, like it's not so just guitar focused for me anymore. When in the past, it really kind of has just been guitar.
Did maybe taking on the role of vocalist help you discover new things on a guitar level, whether it be on a technical level or maybe even give you a different like emotional attachment to the instrument?
I wouldn't say emotional, like a new emotional attachment to the instrument, but it definitely makes me think twice about what I'm writing on guitar and how that's going to work in conjunction with vocals. So it's like this, I don't know, fight going on in my head, right? Like I'm writing something guitar and I'm like, this is really cool. I don't want to like have to like dumb this down because I have to sing over it. So I also try to sit there when I'm writing lyrics with my guitar in my hand and think like, how am I going to realistically scream and play this at the same time? You know, so, or is there not going to be vocals here, or am I going to have to make like a performance version of this because there's two different things going on? So that's something that I'm still kind of figuring out as I go. And there's already been a couple instances where I totally shot myself in the foot and I'm doing like two different patterns and I'm just like, oh God, like now I'm having to like rehearse this, and it's just not like, because the game kind of changes when you add vocals. It's like you get a little bit sloppier on guitar because you're like doing these vocal patterns. So you have to, you know, practice a little harder with that, because it's like, yeah, you practice all the guitar parts, you have them down, then you practice all the vocals, you have them down, but then when you play them together, it's a whole other monster.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm very impressed. There's been a lot of stories where like the guitarists have taken the role of the vocalist just because there was nobody else doing it. Like that's how Dave Mustaine ended up taking the role of vocals. Matt Heafy of Trivium, I think, was like cornered into being the vocalist. So like,
yeah.
I think, and I've been watching those videos. I've been watching live footage. You've been performing it this like you've been doing it your whole life. So I think it works out the best when you're more in that situation. I think anybody who tries to be like James Hetfield when they're first starting it may not always work out.
Yeah, I think honestly, streaming on Twitch helped a lot with that, because I was definitely scared to do it at first. But I had already kind of been practicing by, you know, streaming on Twitch. So I kind of built up that confidence a little bit, especially to also feel comfortable like talking to a crowd. Although digitally, there's still real people that are there and you're interacting with them. So the first time I, you know, got on stage to do like a couple songs that had vocals in it and guitar, I'm not used to like being front and center in the band, you know. I'm kind of like, I don't know what to do with the microphone. Like, get that thing away from me. I'll just be off to the side playing guitar and headbanging. But now I'm just kind of, yeah, having to be front and center, and I'm a little bit more stationary now. Like I'm locked, so I don't have as much opportunity to move around. So when I do get those little windows, I'm just like, all right, I want to just like chill out and headbang for a minute.
Is that when on the live show you maybe bust out Black Dream or Foes or the Fourth Phase in a way, but you know, kind of use those as your breath catcher?
Yeah, we had that before, but I will say on this tour that we're starting on the 25th, the day our album releases, this new set list we have has no instrumental songs.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Wow. Best of luck. You got this.
I know. Thank you.
I believe in you.
Yeah.
How do you define prog? I like having this conversation because every band that's been labeled that has sounded so differently. You know, Porcupine Tree sounds very different from Yes, which sounds very different from Neobliviscaris. So, like, how would you define, like, prog?
I think prog can be, put in front of a lot of different genres. And really, I think it's, you know, the word progressive, you kind of are progressing further past whatever this like block genre is, you know. So there's so many different subgenres of metal, and it can be progressive, you know, death metal. It can be progressive technical metal, whatever you really want to put in front of it, which I really don't like to pigeonhole ourselves. So I kind of use that term sparingly.
Yeah.
And I don't really know like specifically who to compare ourselves to either. So I enjoy like hearing what other people think. I'm like, you tell me what it sounds like.
I mean, I feel like prog is more of an adjective than it is a noun, where like it's just a way to, like, you're right. I've heard progressive rock, progressive metal, progressive death metal, progressive technical death metal, progressive technical death metal, progressive, like, you know, just.
I know, it goes on. And I feel like this album actually is like there's a lot of very prog rock elements to it, you know, and then it also has the death metal elements there too. So, and I think like with the vocals added, you know, because you know Chris is he's singing, but also doing this kind of like gritty kind of singing, and then my vocals are. I mean, I've been told over and over they're very like old school death metal vocals.
Yeah, you led me perfectly into the next question, because being that both you and Chris collaborate on this album on a vocal level, do both of you kind of need to be in the same sort of headspace when singing together in order to make your parts sound like they belong together? Or being that you have such distinct voices, maybe that that you kind of being off in your own worlds actually helps?
Yeah, we kind of are in our own worlds, but Chris is also. I've been working with Chris. This is actually the third band I've been in with Chris. So I've taken him along with me over the years in all my projects. So we've been working together for a really long time, and we have like a pretty good workflow to where we just map out, you know, timestamps of the song when it's done instrumentally. And I'll be like, okay, this section like should be clean vocals. This section will be aggressive vocals. And then we pick a topic, and, you know, whoever like, I don't know, I guess starts writing the lyrics first. Like we just kind of like vibe off of what's written already and then make sure like it makes sense within like the whole song.
Do having such distinct different vocal styles, or having both aggressive and clean vocals, does the instrumentation sort of have to like adjust to like sort of fit that in a way?
Well, we fit the vocals to the instrumentation. So it never really starts as like a vocal idea. Although there's been times where Chris has done things vocally to a song, and Lungta is actually a really good example. That intro riff to Lungta where Chris comes in, originally that arrangement, that section was only going to happen once and then never come back in the song. But once I heard what he did vocally, I was like, that's the hook. Like, we need to rearrange this song, and that needs to come back again because it's so good and it's so catchy and it doesn't sound like anything we've done before. So, and I remember, you know, sending that track to a couple of my producer friends, and they said that they were like, is this Kallias? And I was like, yeah.
Wow. That's
so it was
awesome.
cool. Yeah. So, so, you know, that was like an example, I guess, of like the vocals kind of taking precedent over the arrangement, and then us like tailoring the music to that. But typically, we will just tailor the vocals to like a song that's already instrumentally done and arranged.
Yeah. And kind of like a similar question to what you just answered, but has there ever been a time, or maybe even for the new stuff that you're currently working on, where maybe a lyrical hook, maybe like a sentence or just a line, can maybe help dictate the direction of how an entire song is going to sound?
Not really. I don't think we've done that. Yeah, just because like the music is usually just written first. So, but we do have there's quite a bit of like lyrical hooks in the album too. So we like repeat certain things, and it's it carries on that theme for the song.
Do you feel like when album 2 does come out, and I can't wait for it because you know this album definitely left me wanting more, but do you feel like if a listener just discovers Kallias on album 2, they should maybe go back and listen to the first one in order to fully get the idea of concept 2? Like, do you feel like your albums are meant to be listened to like one watches a movie series?
Yeah. And I do like to do that with other bands as well. Like I think it's always interesting to kind of check out, you know, most of the catalog and just kind of see where things started and how they evolved, because it really is just a whole story, right? It should fit together. Nothing should be too drastic. You know, I feel like we still took a lot of the same elements that we had in the first EP, Fourth Phase, and brought some of those into First Ascent. And of course, like the way we arranged First Ascent is going to be leading up to what the next album is going to sound like, especially with that last song, Lungta.
Yeah. And I'd imagine too, like, because if it's going to be like a trilogy, maybe you have to bring like a B-side song from the first one and sort of bring it into the third one, kind of like what a trilogy does, exposes like a side of the past or something like that. So,
Oh, like a remix or something?
yeah, something
That
like
might be cool.
Yeah,
That's an idea.
You thought you knew the first record, but here's this secret that was never shown. Like, give your album
Yeah.
like a Resident Evil sort of effect to it.
Yeah, that's a good idea. I'll put that in the bank.
Awesome. So before we go, I want to thank you so much for your time today, and most of all, thank you for this amazing album. It's definitely just an extraordinary listen that takes you on multiple spaces and times and multiple emotions. So thank you for this record.
Yeah, I'm so glad, happy to be back on the podcast, and I'm glad you get to listen to the album.
Well, it's great to have you back. Is there just anything else that you'd like to promote with the release of First Ascent, with the upcoming tour? Anything you're allowed to talk about, feel free to plug.
Yeah. So I'm super excited for everyone to hear the record coming out on the 25th of August, and that is the first day of our West Coast tour with Cyborg Octopus. Really stoked to be touring with them. We'll do a bunch of dates in California and a date in Vegas as well. So if anyone's on the West Coast, and then keep your eyes peeled too for something happening on the East Coast soon as well.
Please, yes. And Cyborg Octopus is awesome too. I freaking love that band. So that's an awesome lineup. I hope that East Coast run consists of them joining you. But thank you so much, everybody. We are here with Kallias, First Ascent. Be sure to pick that up August 25th. This is Alex from Heavy New York, and we will see you next time.